So I want to get your assessment of the Boogaloos boy. Now, I interviewed that guy Magnus, and he claimed that the Boogaloo Boys are non-racist, anti-war, and pro-LGBTQ, and they work with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Now, you've been on the ground. Is that accurate, what he said?
I think that it's true, but with mixed results. The Boogaloos have tried, in many cases, to form alliances with the left, but as basically extreme libertarians, they are not perfectly aligned with the left or the right? They certainly diverge from the left on issues like private property ownership, capitalism, and so forth. And so there's a lot of skepticism by certain groups about do the Boogaloos protect private property, for example, and does that sort of align them with sort of fascism or with the right wing or something. So I have seen Boogaloos rally together with Black Lives Matter on issues about police violence, what they see as police brutality, targeted gun control, people who have died in jail, for example. I actually saw there was a really, really interesting event that I went to in person. And again, I don't think I ever really saw this in the media, where the Boogaloos were part of a coalition that was protesting in Ohio against the shutdown stuff, right? So anti-COVID shutdown. This would be kind of aligning them with the right. So there were right-wing militia people there were sort of MAGA supporters, and the Boogaloos were among them. And what was really fascinating about that, and the Proud Boys were there, by the way. The Boogaloos started off the day on the side of the Proud Boys. And what was interesting was because of largely the Proud Boys' presence, the Black Lives Matter and Antifa groups of the area came to counter-protest them. And when that happened, the Boogaloos went over straight into the middle. They stood with their rifles in between the two sides, facing toward the right wing, and it became arguing between the Proud Boys and the Boogaloos, like, why are you defending Black Lives Matter? And the Boogaloos were describing, well, they have a right to free speech, and they were describing in particular that they aligned with the left on the police, whereas the Proud Boys were sort of sucking up to the police. And so the arguments were things like, who do you think's actually going to enforce the lockdown? It's going to be cops, right? And so there was interesting dialogue, but it actually did escalate into fistfights. Boogaloos fought with Proud Boys that day, and by the very end of the day, I filmed an interaction in which black bloc-clad, self-identified anti-fascists actually shook hands with them, and they said, regardless of the wider thing that's going on, so referencing that these two groups would traditionally be seen as rivals, that they stood together that day, and he said something like, and that does count for something. So there are certainly mixed results. I've been at other events where leftists have come to counter-protest, and the Boogaloos have tried to say, we're on your side, and the leftists have absolutely not had it. So it's very situational, and it's very fragile, I think, based on what they're actually doing.
So you wouldn't challenge Magnus's claim. You're not pushing back on his claim that they often. Well, you just told a story about where they protected.
So
that he
I
said
think
they
it's
protect.
a good example where the alliance with the left of the Boogaloos is situational, issue by issue. They certainly try to make it happen. Sometimes there's pushback, and sometimes they're successful at doing it on the street. In other words, there's nuance, and you need live, independent journalists to actually show that.
And so, what was your reaction when you saw people reacting to our interview with Magnus, a Boogaloo boy, as if he was in the KKK instead of someone who's opposing this stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that there's definitely an ideological rigidity that can happen on either side, and sometimes there is, some clashing when people actually try to make those overlaps. I find those alliances very interesting because there was a time when even, people sometimes conflate Black Lives Matter, Antifa. Those are two kind of independent ideologies that have found reasons to coalesce with each other. But for example, in 2014, 2015, I remember when white anarchist was kind of used as almost a slur among Black Lives Matter activists, like, look out for white anarchists who are going to try to hijack our event, escalate it, whatever. And now largely they've been able to, hybridize, that they've been able to work together. Sometimes anti-fascists are viewed as security for BLM, and sometimes they still want nothing to do with each other or want their events distinct. Boogaloos, I think, are in the very beginning stages, first of all, of existing, right, as a relatively new movement, but they're also having a challenging time where they are trying to make coalitions, in some cases with sides like the Proud Boys on something like, and that fell apart and they, fist fought, but where they're literally standing on the same side of an issue of COVID with the Proud Boys, but then they try to ally with the left on policing. And so, you know, it's messy, and it remains to be seen what direction they'll end up going.